I didn't know my life was about to change the moment he said it. We were sitting across from each other at the dining table, half-eaten food between us, the kind of quiet that usually came after a long workday. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't hesitate. He said it casually, like he was commenting on the weather. "Everyone thinks I could do much better than you," my fiancé said. "Maybe I should." For a second, I honestly thought I misheard him. I looked up from my plate, waiting for a smile, a follow-up, some sign that this was a badly delivered joke. But his expression didn't change. Calm, certain, almost bored. "Do whatever you feel," I replied. My voice sounded steady, even to me. That surprised me. Inside, something cracked quietly, the way glass does before it shatters. That night, I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I finished my dinner, cleaned the kitchen, and went to bed while he scrolled through his phone beside me, completely unbothered by what he'd just said. He fell asleep within minutes. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying his words over and over. "Everyone thinks I could do better than you." 2 days later, while he was at work, I made a phone call he didn't know about. I quietly removed my name from the wedding venue contract he loved to brag about, the one he told everyone was iconic, the one I was paying most of. I didn't tell him. I didn't warn him. I just signed the papers and walked out. A week later, at exactly 2:27 a.m., my phone buzzed on the nightstand. One message, one line. "Call me now before this gets worse for you." It was from his best man. My hands went cold as I stared at the screen. "My name is Ava. I'm 29 years old, and I spent 2 years engaged to a man who saw our wedding as his personal stage, and me as a supporting role he could replace the moment something better came along." This is the story of the week everything fell apart, and the late-night phone call that saved me from marrying the wrong person. Before that sentence shattered everything, my life looked stable in the way people envy quietly. I was 29, working in project management for a mid-sized firm, the kind of job that didn't make headlines but paid reliably and rewarded consistency. I liked structure. I liked plans. I liked knowing where my life was going. I had dated enough to know I wasn't chasing fireworks anymore. I wanted partnership, respect, a future that felt earned. That's why Liam felt right. We met when we were 24, introduced by mutual friends at a small get-together. He was confident, social, effortlessly charming. He knew how to hold a room without trying too hard. When he focused on me, he made me feel chosen. Not urgently, not desperately, but deliberately. We dated for 3 years before getting engaged. 3 solid years. No dramatic breakups, no cheating rumors, no chaos. We talked about the future constantly, where we'd live, when we'd have kids, how we'd balance work and family. I believed we were aligned. When he proposed, he did it in a way that felt thoughtful, not flashy. Just the two of us, a quiet moment, a ring that was expensive but symbolic. I cried. He cried. He told me I was his person. I believed him. Wedding planning started almost immediately, and that's when the first cracks appeared, small enough that I convinced myself they didn't matter. Liam threw himself into the planning with an intensity that surprised me. Venues, vendors, photographers, menus. He treated the wedding like a personal brand launch. Pinterest boards multiplied overnight. Group chats exploded. He talked about the aesthetic more than the marriage itself. At first, I didn't mind letting him take the lead. He had strong opinions about colors and layouts. I didn't care about centerpieces. I cared about us. But gradually, taking the lead turned into excluding me. He made decisions without asking, then acted annoyed when I had questions. He scheduled vendor meetings during my work hours, then complained I wasn't involved enough. If I suggested something practical, a smaller guest list, a simpler menu, he brushed it off. "You don't get it," he'd say. "Appearances matter." The venue became the centerpiece of everything, a historic estate an hour outside the city. Beautiful, expensive. Liam had dreamed of getting married there since college. The deposit alone was $15,000, with another $25,000 due closer to the date. We agreed to split costs. Somehow, I ended up covering nearly 70%. Liam framed it as fair. He was doing the work, planning, coordinating, managing details. I was lucky he was so invested. I told myself that relationships aren't always 50-50. I ignored the way his family reinforced the imbalance. His parents praised him endlessly for pulling this off. His friends joked that I'd hit the jackpot landing him. I laughed along, even when the jokes landed a little too close to the truth. The wedding stopped feeling like something we were creating together. It became his project, And I became the person expected to support it, financially, emotionally, quietly. Still, I stayed. I told myself stress makes people act strange. I told myself once the wedding passed, things would settle. I didn't know yet that Liam wasn't just planning a wedding, he was planning an exit. Looking back now, the warning signs were everywhere. They just didn't scream. They whispered. It started with how Liam talked to me when no one else was around. Not cruel, not openly disrespectful, just dismissive in a way that was easy to excuse if you love someone enough. When I questioned the guest list ballooning past 200 people, he sighed like I was being difficult. When I suggested trimming costs, he accused me of thinking small. When I asked why I was paying more than we agreed, he reminded me how much work he was putting in, how stressful this all was for him. I'm carrying the mental load, he said once. The least you can do is help financially. I remember sitting there, nodding, even though something in my chest tightened. His friends reinforced it without meaning to. At a group dinner, one of them joked, "Man, Liam, you really upgraded your life with this wedding." Another laughed and added, "Yeah, don't mess this up, Ava. You won the lottery." Everyone laughed, including me. At home, he became increasingly impatient with my presence in the planning process. If I asked to be included, he accused me of micromanaging. If I stepped back, he complained I wasn't supportive enough. I started walking on invisible lines, constantly adjusting myself to avoid setting him off. One night, I overheard him on the phone with a friend. "It's going to be insane," he said proudly. "Everyone's going to see what I've built." Not who he was marrying, what he'd built. That distinction sat with me longer than I wanted it to. His family added pressure in quieter ways. His mother would ask pointed questions about timelines, babies, career sacrifices, whether I was ready to support a man with ambition. When I joked about him supporting me too, she smiled politely and changed the subject. I started noticing how often Liam spoke about value, who was valuable, what looked impressive, what connections mattered. Love, in his vocabulary, became secondary to optics. The night everything shifted was during a dinner that should have been forgettable. I suggested reducing the guest list again, gently, carefully. "This isn't negotiable," he snapped. "These people are important." "Important to who?" I asked. "To my career, my family, my image," he said. "You wouldn't understand." That was the first time I felt truly small sitting across from him. And then came the sentence I couldn't unhear. "Everyone thinks I could do much better than you." He said it like it was a shared truth, one I was late to accept. In that moment, I understood something painful. He didn't just believe he was settling. He believed I should be grateful. And once that belief takes root, love doesn't stand a chance. The night he said it didn't feel dramatic at first. We were halfway through dinner, the kind of meal we'd eaten 100 times before. No candles, no special occasion. Just routine. I brought up the guest list again, carefully, choosing my words the way I'd learned to do over months of tiptoeing. "Maybe we could cap it at 150, I said. "It would save a lot, and it'd feel more personal." He didn't even look up from his phone. "This isn't negotiable," he said. "Those people matter." "Important to who?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. He finally looked at me then, irritation flickering across his face. "Important to my career, my family, my image. You wouldn't understand." Something in my chest tightened. "We're getting married," I said quietly, "not launching a brand." He rolled his eyes. "You're so simple sometimes. This is how the real world works. Appearances matter. Connections matter." "And I don't?" I asked. He waved it off. "Don't be dramatic. Of course you matter. You're the bride." It felt less like reassurance and more like a role assignment. Then he put his fork down, leaned back in his chair, and said it, casually, confidently, like it had been waiting to come out. "Everyone thinks I could do much better than you. Maybe I should." The words hit me like a slap. Not because they were loud, but because they were effortless. "Everyone thinks that," he continued, warming to the topic. "My friends, my family, even some of yours have hinted it. You're punching above your weight, Ava." He laughed. "Don't look so hurt. It's just facts. I'm settling, and everyone knows it. The least you could do is not complain about the wedding budget." I stared at him, my mind scrambling to reconcile this man with the one who had cried when he proposed, with the one who told me I was his person, with the future I'd been planning in good faith. "Do whatever you feel," I said quietly. He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means if you think you can do better, no one's stopping you." "You're being sensitive," he said. "I'm just being honest." I didn't answer. I finished my dinner. I cleaned the kitchen. I went to bed early while he scrolled through photos of venues and comment threads full of praise for his taste. The The next morning, while he was at work, I made a phone call that felt unreal even as I dialed. The wedding venue contract was in both our names. We had both signed it, but only one of us needed to be present to make modifications. "I'd like to remove myself from the contract," I said calmly, "and transfer full responsibility to my fiancé." The coordinator paused. "Are you sure? This would make him solely liable for the remaining balance." "I understand," I said. "That's exactly what I want." By noon, it was done. I didn't tell him. I didn't hint. I just went on with my week, watching him plan a wedding he no longer had my financial backing for, knowing the foundation he was standing on had already shifted. I didn't know yet that this was only the first domino. The real collapse was coming. Shock doesn't always look like chaos. For me, it looked like restraint. The days after that dinner moved in a strange, suspended rhythm. Liam went on planning the wedding with the same manic enthusiasm, completely unaware that the ground beneath him had shifted. He talked about florists, menus, seating charts. He showed me photos on his phone, waiting for approval, waiting for praise. I gave him neither. I nodded. I said, "Looks nice." I asked neutral questions. Inside, I was watching him like a stranger I'd just met, studying the confidence, the entitlement, the ease with which he assumed my compliance. At night, when he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and replayed everything I'd ignored. The jokes, the comments, the way he spoke about value. I asked myself the question I'd been avoiding. What did I accept because I wanted this to work? I didn't rush to confront him. I didn't owe him an explosion. I owed myself clarity. I opened a separate account and quietly moved my savings. I stopped transferring money into the wedding fund. I began packing some of my personal things, documents, clothes, items I couldn't replace, and stored them in boxes in the garage, out of sight. Small moves, quiet moves. The first confrontation didn't come from me. It came at 2:27 a.m. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the screen lighting up the dark bedroom. One message. "Call me now before this gets worse for you." It was from Jessica, Liam's best friend since college, the woman who was supposed to stand beside him on our wedding day. I stepped into the living room and called her immediately. "Ava," she said, relief flooding her voice. "Thank God. You need to know what's happening." "What's going on?" I asked, my heart already sinking. "It's Liam," she said, "and the wedding, and someone else." The words landed slowly. She told me about a woman at his company, how it started as flirting, how it turned into secret meetings, how he'd been seeing her for 4 months, how, at his bachelor event earlier that night, he'd talked openly about his plan. "He said you're safe," Jessica whispered. "Useful. That he's marrying you for stability, that once things are set, he'll leave." I sat down on the couch, the room spinning. "And everyone heard this?" I asked. "Yes," she said. Some laughed. I didn't. That call didn't shatter me. It confirmed me. Everything clicked. The comment at dinner, the entitlement, the confidence with which he assumed I'd stay. When I hung up, I didn't cry. I felt calm in a way that scared me, because I knew exactly what I was going to do next. By the time morning came, I had already crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Not emotionally, legally, financially, psychologically. Liam came home late from his bachelor night, smelling like alcohol and confidence, humming to himself as if nothing in the world could touch him. I didn't say a word. I lay awake, listening to his uneven breathing as he passed out beside me, thinking about how easily he slept inside the lie he'd built. I was waiting for him when he stumbled into the kitchen the next morning. He looked rough, hungover, still riding the high of attention and approval. He poured himself coffee and smiled like everything was normal. "Morning," he said. "Last night was amazing. You should see the pictures." I studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Jessica called me," I said. The change in his face was subtle, but I caught it. Not guilt, calculation. The quick internal assessment of how much I knew and how he could spin it. "She did?" he asked casually. "About what?" "About the woman from your office, by some," I said. "About the affair. About what you told everyone last night." He scoffed. "That's ridiculous. Jessica's jealous. She's always had issues with me." "She's not the only one who heard you," I said. "You said it out loud. That you're marrying me for stability. That I'm safe and useful. That you'll leave once it benefits you." He set his mug down slowly. "I was drunk," he said. "People say stupid things when they're drunk." "Drunk words usually reflect sober plans," I replied. "And you've been seeing her for 4 months." That did it. His face went pale. "Who told you that?" he asked. "Does it matter?" I said. "It's true." He shifted tactics immediately, sliding into a softer tone, the one he used when he wanted control back. "Ava, I love you," he said. Whatever I said was venting. She means nothing. I chose you. You chose my money, I said. There's a difference. That's not fair. Isn't it? I asked. Because while you were building something with her, I was planning a wedding and paying for our future. He reached for my hand. I pulled it back. I'll end it, he said quickly. We can move past this. No, I said, we can't. His expression hardened. Why not? Because I already did, I said calmly. I removed my name from the venue contract last week. The silence was immediate. You what? He asked. The remaining balance, I continued. $25,000. That's yours now. I'm not paying for a wedding to someone who sees me as a stepping stone. His mouth opened, then closed. You can't do that. I already did, I said. The paperwork is filed. Your name is the only one on the contract. I can't afford that, he snapped. I don't have $25,000. I looked at him steadily. Maybe the woman you're planning to leave me for can help. That's when the mask dropped. You're going to ruin me over this? He said, anger flaring. Over a few drunk comments? Over 4 months of infidelity and a calculated plan to use me financially, I replied. The comments were just the confession. He stood up, pacing, running a hand through his hair. I'll tell everyone you abandoned me. I'll destroy your reputation. Go ahead, I said. Tell them everything. Tell them what you said. Tell them about her. Let's see whose story survives. He stopped pacing. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked scared. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt finished. I picked up my bag, already packed, already waiting by the door. I'm done, I said, and I'm not funding your exit. I walked out without slamming the door, and behind me, the wedding, the one that was never really about us, began to collapse. Walking away didn't feel empowering. It felt hollow. The first night alone in my new apartment, I sat on the floor with my back against the couch, the lights off, the city humming faintly outside the window. The place was smaller than the home I'd left behind. No wedding magazines stacked on the counter, no seating charts taped to the fridge, just silence and the echo of everything that had almost happened. That was when the weight landed, not the anger, not the betrayal. The grief. I grieved the version of myself who believed love was enough, the woman who trusted that commitment meant protection. The future I'd already lived inside my head, the children I'd imagined, the holidays, the life I thought I was building with someone who was secretly planning to discard me. I didn't miss Liam. I missed who I thought he was. Sleep became fractured. I woke up in the middle of the night, replaying conversations, wondering how long he'd been lying, how many moments had been real, how many had been performance. I questioned myself relentlessly. Was I too trusting, too calm, too easy to use? Messages started pouring in. Some from him. Apologies layered with blame, promises tangled with threats. Some from mutual friends, asking what happened, carefully neutral, afraid to take a side. A few stopped reaching out altogether. And then came the worst part. His story. Liam started telling people I had cold feet, that I was overwhelmed, that I walked away without explanation. He painted himself as blindsided, heartbroken, abandoned. I saw it on social media. Vague posts about betrayal, quotes about loyalty, comments full of sympathy. For one moment, just one, something dark whispered inside me. Expose everything. Ruin him. I opened the folder on my phone. Screenshots. Messages. Proof. My finger hovered over the screen. Then I closed it, because I realized something important in that moment. If I needed to destroy him to feel whole, he still had power over me. The lowest point came days later, when I ran into his mother at the grocery store. She looked confused, hurt, searching my face for answers. You could have tried harder, she said quietly. Marriage takes work. I nodded politely, went home, and cried harder than I had since leaving. That night, sitting alone in the quiet, I finally admitted the truth to myself. This was rock bottom. Not because I lost him, but because I lost the illusion I'd been living inside. And as terrifying as that was, there was something strangely freeing about it. Because when you hit the bottom, there's only one direction left. Up. The turning point didn't arrive with a confrontation. It came quietly, the way real clarity always does. One morning, a few days after I ran into his mother, I woke up and realized I hadn't checked my phone immediately. No instinct to brace myself. No urge to see what Liam might have posted overnight. I lay there for a moment, listening to my own breathing, and understood something that stopped me cold. I wasn't waiting for him anymore. Later that day, Jessica called. I need you to hear this from me, she said. People are talking, and not the way he thought they would. I sat down on the edge of my bed. She tried to spin it, Jessica continued. Said you abandoned him, that you were emotionally distant, but it's not sticking. Why? I asked. Because too many people were there, she said. Too many people heard what he said at the bachelor event, about using you, about the plan, about the other woman. I closed my eyes. And once one person starts telling the truth, she added, others stop protecting the lie. That night, my phone rang again, a number I didn't recognize. It was his mother. Her voice was different this time, not defensive, not confused. I spoke to Jessica, she said slowly, and to a few others. I didn't interrupt. If what they told me is true, she continued, then I owe you an apology. Something inside me loosened, not relief, release. I didn't raise him to treat someone like that, she said quietly, and I'm sorry you were put in that position. Thank you, I replied, and I meant it. When the call ended, I sat there in the stillness, realizing this was the moment everything shifted. Not because people believed me, but because I no longer needed them to. For weeks I had replayed his words, wondering if there was something I should have done differently. Something I missed. Some way I could have saved it. Now I saw the truth clearly. I hadn't failed at love. I had refused to be used. That realization changed how I stood, how I breathed, how I moved through the world. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. I needed to keep going. And for the first time since everything fell apart, I felt steady doing exactly that. The consequences didn't hit Liam all at once. They came in waves. The first wave was financial. The venue contacted him directly about the remaining balance, $25,000, due within weeks. When he couldn't pay, the deposit, $15,000, was forfeited. Gone. The same deposit he'd bragged about, the one he said proved how serious the wedding was. Then the vendors started calling. Florist, photographer, planner. Contracts he had personally signed, without reading the fine print. Invoices he assumed I would quietly help cover. I didn't. I stayed silent and let the paperwork speak for me. The second wave was social. The story he'd tried to tell didn't survive contact with witnesses. Jessica didn't back down. Other people who'd laughed that night at the bachelor event suddenly stopped laughing when asked directly what had been said. Conversations shifted. People went quiet. Invitations dried up. He stopped posting vague quotes. The third wave was professional. The woman from his office, the one he'd been waiting for, wanted nothing to do with the fallout. Once the affair became public knowledge, it stopped being exciting and started being inconvenient. She transferred teams. Then she stopped answering his messages altogether. The future he'd been calculating evaporated. I watched all of this from a distance, not with satisfaction, with detachment. About a month later, his mother called again. I didn't know, she said softly, and I should have asked better questions. We talked for a few minutes. She apologized. I accepted it, and then I let the connection end. Friends I hadn't heard from in weeks started reaching out. Some apologized for believing the wrong version. Others admitted they'd suspected something was off long before everything collapsed. I didn't need their validation anymore. Liam, last I heard, had moved back in with his parents. The wedding was officially canceled. The narrative he tried to control now controlled him instead. And me, I moved forward quietly. I settled into my apartment, reconnected with friends I'd sidelined during wedding planning, threw myself into work, reclaimed parts of myself I'd shrunk to make room for someone else's ego. I didn't celebrate his downfall. I simply kept living. And that, I realized, was the most final consequence of all. 3 months after everything fell apart, I woke up one morning and realized I wasn't carrying him with me anymore. Not his words, not his opinions, not the version of myself I had twisted into shape just to be chosen. My apartment was smaller than the life I almost married into, but it felt honest. Every piece of furniture was mine. Every decision was mine. No one evaluating my worth. No one ranking me against imaginary upgrades. I had stopped asking myself why he did it. That question belongs to people who plan to stay. What I learned instead was quieter, but stronger. Love is not proven by endurance. Commitment is not measured by how much disrespect you survive. And anyone who frames marriage as strategy has already disqualified themselves as a partner. People still ask me if I regret how I handled it, if removing my name from the venue contract was too harsh, if I should have talked more, waited longer, tried harder. But here's the truth they don't like hearing. The moment he said, "Everyone thinks I could do better than you," he told me exactly who he was. All I did was believe him. Walking away wasn't revenge, it was alignment. I didn't destroy his life. I simply stopped funding a future that was never meant to include me as an equal. The consequences that followed were the result of his own choices, spoken aloud, witnessed, and finally taken seriously. If there's one thing I hope anyone listening takes from my story, it's this. Never confuse being chosen with being used. Never stay where love has to be justified. And never build a future with someone who sees you as a temporary solution. Everyone thought he could do better than me. Turns out I was the one who needed to do better. And I did.